units that, for the most part, rental units that are some type of financing program.
Not necessarily. It's just preservation of NOAA. So it just is for apartments that have affordable rents.
So, well, if it's for NOAA, back to what I've said previously, those units cycling back up the ladder are an important part of the housing base. So, you know, I don't think we should be impeding the reinvestment by investors of their properties.
Who really supports this? I think it was Janet, Norm, Steve, Tom. We're very highly in support of this. And why is that? Oh, Bernadette's trying to get in. I'm trying to figure out how to get her in.
I'm here.
Okay.
I was going to say, encourage, to me, encourage and ensure are, I mean, I guess what my concern was, I have sensitivity to government intervention in this way. So, I mean, I'm fine with encouraging strategies to maintain affordability for successive households, but ensuring if you're ensuring that it's going to be successful, then you're not really encouraging, you're sort of mandating. So, and then it isn't NOAA anymore. So to me, it was more like, and then if you're kind of, so that's where I had a problem, was that it just felt like a little bit big government to me.
If we changed ensure to provide, would that address your concern? I'm trying to find it.
Yes, it would address my concern. I mean, encouraging is fine, mandating is not fine.
We're leaving encourage, we're changing ensure to provide.
That works for me.
All right. Are the rest of you, all right, so that would be Dan and Joe, who also gave zeros. Is this something that you still want not included as a strategy?
Did we eliminate zero?
We did eliminate zero.
Okay.
Yes, so they're all ones.
Yeah, but I think we need to honor the fact that one's a zero. It's just that not one person can block it for everyone else.
It's interesting. This is a polarized strategy.
It is.
It's the two ends.
The next one is two.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a good strategy. It doesn't lead to, it leads to investment in housing, so I don't support it.
I'm sorry, Dan, it leads to what?
Investment in housing.
I thought the basic idea behind this was to work with partners like Aon, who are committed to keeping their properties affordable for the long term.
One thing I would, I think with the change that Bernadette suggested, it keeps it alive, but I don't think it really terribly interferes for those who don't want to be a part of any government program. But there are other things, like how you tax something or how you treat it that can either hinder or help. Then also all the affordable housing in Edina has a time clock on it, whether it's 15 years or 30 years. And at some point you have to the city should at least be supportive to see how they can maintain or preserve affordable housing, because if you lose that affordable housing, you're backsliding from your base. Now, I understand that sometimes the need for a particular unit changes over time. Maybe 25 years from now, you don't want so many one-bedroom units or whatever it might be. But to me, it's like you could say also encourage long-term management of housing. I mean, you want to help your existing housing stock, whether it's providing rehabilitation or fix-up programs, or there's just so many things to think about. And I guess I didn't see this as terribly intrusive to those who want to stick to strictly the market.
I guess I don't know what
Seems
you
like
mean
every
by
housing
management
co-
strategies. I guess I don't know what you mean by management strategies. Do you mean how these are managed? And if that's the case, I don't know how government can get involved with the management of these things. If you're talking about the overall general high level managing, that's a different thing.
I guess I thought of it as high level, not actually.
Merritt,
Getting a lot of background noise from somebody.
I'm gonna
Can you
mute
mute
some
if you're
people.
not talking?
It
Anyhow,
seems like 11.
For me, Merritt?
It seems like 11 is the same thing as 9, but more generally, I agree that long-term management is confusing to me because that sounds like what a landlord would do.
Joe?
I like what Steve said. What Steve said was really clear, but it was, in my view, different than what these couple of sentences say. And maybe it's accomplishing the same thing but it's a clear way to say it.
Can we have? Well, Stephanie, going back to what you guys were saying about management, I mean, to me, the city's decision to adopt rental licensing is an example of a tactic that would support, I mean, by going into every unit or a handful of units, making sure they're kept up, kind of encouraging that reinvestment that Dan's talking about, or minimal reinvestment, all of that stuff. You're providing, you're encouraging people to maintain and keep the properties up to standard. So it might be stuff that the city's already doing that supports this, but I agree that, I mean, property management isn't really the purview, but I mean, of the city, but cities continue to, I think, particularly the larger cities, more and more dictatorial in their way they want people to manage rental housing in their city. So, I mean, I guess if that's the direction that we're heading, if it's more micro, then I'm going to stick with a 0. If it's more, sure, like Tom was saying that, and Steve, the way that I understood it is that, you want to think about the legacy of this housing and how can the city support the legacy, then if it's more of a supportive kind of thing with fix-up programs and for that sort of thing, I mean, I can support that. But if it's like, gets down to screening, how you're going to screen your tenants and how you're going to do this and how you're going to do that, I'm strongly opposed to that.
Oh, Dan, Tom, hold on, you're mute. I had to mute everyone because of background noise. Did you?
Okay. I understand Bernadette's position, and I think that's appropriate. I mean, I thought of it at the high level, you know, that you want to have policies and, you know, at least make available assistance when needed to maintain affordable housing. But yeah, yeah, the micro thing, I agree with Bernadette. I don't think that that's productive.
I think we've had enough discussion on this now that it's clear that it's not clear. And if it's not clear to us, it's not going to be clear to whoever we ask to read it. I recommend that we drop this strategy.
All right, it's in orange now, fist to 5 for dropping. And Bernadette, I can't see you for some reason, so you're gonna have to shout it out.
5.
Okay, we have 2 zeros, 2 people that don't want to drop it, and the rest 5 want to drop it. Janet and Tom, do you think we can incorporate these concepts that you like in another strategy?
Well, yeah, I mean, that maybe, or rewrite it, you know, like Bernadette was suggesting, maybe on a broad basis.
Because number 11 does talk about in a very much more general way.
Well, I don't see NOAA though as the only. I guess
This is under NOAA. This is under NOAA. Or preservation. This is under preservation.
Yeah, this is not under affordable housing specifically.
No, this is under preservation of diverse housing stock.
Well, I mean, technically, we do have some buildings that aren't NOAA, but they are affordable housing, such as some of the senior buildings. So I suppose if you added a line to, if there's not just NOAA, I don't know, and other government assisted affordable housing or something like that.
Well, let's keep those in mind because I think most people, 5, want to delete it. So keep what your interests are with regards to it to make sure that the overall concept does get included elsewhere about making sure we have strong housing. And I think that's the overall goal of all of these. Let's move to number 11. And we had again, it was split. Identify strategies preserving different types of NOAA properties. And it was recommended that this could be a tool because it's strategies. Identify the current inventory of NOAA properties. Oh, these are the tools. Identify the inventory. That would be under this. So, Dan and Bernadette again. And Steve.
So the similar thoughts. You're not creating more housing. You are robbing a. That's not the right word, but you're robbing a group of people the opportunity who might want to move to Edina or live in Edina and want to live in a renovated apartment. You're taking that away from them because you're preserving the only way you're going to preserve the rents is to discourage investment in those units. So I don't, we've created one class of people and given them priority over another class. And not that I'm opposed to that. It's just that I don't think people that are just about to move up one more click on the economic ladder, I don't think that's who we should be kind of putting our foot on their necks.
Merritt, you're on mute. Sorry, I unmuted you. Okay, Merritt.
I don't see as applying to all NOAA units. To me, it seems like it's things like having a program that offers money for repairs and rehab. It might be the city offering to buy a developer out if they put the place on the market. Might be directed for other things. And so any of that would only that owners can opt into the landscape of NOAA properties that exist in Edina. So perhaps could help 10% of them, but 90% would still be open for whatever the market's doing. So to me, very much seems like an opt-in for the people that want it, and the majority of people wouldn't even worry about it. Just prohibit anybody.
Well, it could end up like that, but it just identifies strategies. The strategy may be we don't allow any unit that's affordable now to do anything that would allow its rents to move up. So
I don't know if that's legally allowed.
well,
It's
legally
legally
that's
allowed.
not the point. That's the point. Okay, for Merritt to say, here's how I think it's going to be, you may be correct, but that's just how you think it's going to be. And my concern is, if suddenly there was a great desire to live in Edina by people making 70% AMI, and apartment owners would soon realize there was this push in the market, and they started competing for those renters and renovating their units to attract them. Who are we to say that's not a good thing? But the city may go, yeah, we're supposed to have a strategy to preserve NOAA, and we're losing all these units. So,
And the city has no legal authority to stop people from doing that. I mean, that's a Supreme Court lawsuit.
I don't want to get into legal weeds on it. My point is, I don't want to do something that might affect the number of units for people making a little bit more money to ensure more units for people making a little less money. I just think there must be a different strategy. I don't know what it is.
Okay.
That's my
Steve?
that's
Oh,
my
sorry.
answer to it.
Okay. Steve?
Quite a while ago, we did some editing, and I'm not quite sure exactly how this ended up the way it is, but number 11 has been rewritten at one point to say, preserve the different NOAA properties by, and then picking up the two things that are listed down here as A and B under point 10. So preserve different types of NOAA properties by subsidizing or upgrading to current standards, or use land use trusts. So it was an attempt to say, here are two very specific strategies we would consider pursuing to preserve NOAA properties. Because right now it's pretty vague.
We put those tools because land trusts and subsidizing maintenance would be a tool. So that's why they're to the side. They're right here as tools to do that.
Well, you can see that there's a note that says tool for strategy 11 below. So somehow it got connected to strategy 10. So I'm not quite sure, as I said, I'm not quite sure what happened in our editing process, but we were trying at one point to make 11 be a little bit more clear and straightforward. Because right now it's simply saying identify strategies. Well, that's what we're trying to write. Sorry, go ahead, Merritt.
identify tools for preserving different, oh, sorry. I'm off mute.
Yeah, you're off mute.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
You could say identify tools for preserving different types of NOAA properties. And maybe it would be good to add something here, like identify tools for property that are no properties, so that it makes it clear that it's a property owner opt and not a mandate. That's my suggestion. If there would be a way to make it palatable by making clear that it's not supposed to lead down the road of government mandates on all NOAA units.
One other comment I had about it, I think one of the things that's a struggle, and it kind of addresses what Dan was saying, is this NOAA definition, because it's not like, it's very hard to define, and it's not, there's no like set guidelines, or, I mean, there are, but there aren't, because the rents could be 65% instead of 60 or 81 instead of 80, you know, it's just kind of stuff that's hanging out there. And to me, it's like, I think the idea is identify tools for property owners who wish to preserve different types of, are we specifically talking about rental here? As I see below, it talks about home ownership, but to me, maybe you broaden the language a little bit where it says different types of housing, you know, again, encouraging the idea of reinvestment. And then depending on the program, that would have the guidelines that the person chooses to opt into, instead of trying to identify it up here. I mean,
Well, before we do that, this is in the NOAA section.
right, but I'm saying the NOAA of today, the market non-NOAA of today could be the NOAA of tomorrow. And if you don't have a very clear definition of NOAA, then one person's NOAA is another person's, you know, just market rate rental property. You know, I mean, people don't necessarily see themselves as NOAA quote unquote property owners. You know, I don't know. It's like to me, it's like a term that's caught fire. It doesn't really mean anything. It just means like older rental properties, but there isn't really a good definition, because it is market controlled. That if it's, you know, less than 80%, well, what about a property that's rents are at 82%? You know, are they not NOAA? Well, yes, they are, you know, so I think it's just, but you don't want to say for old rental property. I mean, that, you know, that's it. I mean, I guess you could say that actually, but the idea again is there are older properties that are really in high and really well maintained, and they command very high rent. So it, you know, again, you can't really say it's about the age of the building either. So, you know, again, it's a variety of housing. It's kind of, that's the goal. And I think when we talked about it, that idea was to to encourage the development and investment of a variety of housing types within the city, so it doesn't become monotonous.
You know, I would like to point out that up here, you have encouraged the preservation, maintenance, and rehabilitation of existing naturally occurring affordable housing. Isn't 11 repetitive? I mean, do we need this at all, since we already approved this up here? It seems like it's repetitive and we're spending time on something that we already have.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
So, does anyone move to delete this? All right, 5 to 5 on removing this.
5.
Janet, Dan, okay. Conversation over. Why is it not letting me highlight it though?
Stephanie, could I make one small change then to that one? I would also say, and government subsidized housing, again, what are you going to do when Aon's 30 years are up? Or if suddenly Common Bond wants to pull out of its 3 housing programs and they're at the end of their contracts. They never were NOAA projects, but I just want to, the ones that were developed as subsidized housing, don't you want to have at least something added to this language to preserve those housing units?
Part of me feels like that's already done. I'm hesitant right now, Tom, to go back to something that's already been approved when we still have this list left to go.
Well, it was
why don't I put?
I was going to suggest that, but then we took away that one tool.
Well, we've got number
somewhere.
2. We've got number 2 that addresses Tom's request. So we have 1 and 2 are both approved. The second one refers to existing subsidized housing. The first one refers to NOAA.
Here, Tom.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
Okay.
But since we didn't vote on that one, there's a blank on Dan or.
It's already been. It was Dan. He stepped away, but it's in the history. And considering we have so much more to move forward on, I don't want to revisit history. Identify current best practices successfully employed by other cities. I don't know if this could be a tool. Is this considered? Nope, it's not. It's divided 3-2-2.
I think it's a tool that can be used in almost every strategy. So maybe it belongs more as a tool than a piece of a strategy.
I don't, considering the level of professionals working at the city and the elected, I don't even think we had to say this.
I don't know. I kind of like looking at worst practices, ones that have failed miserably. I mean, that's my mode.
You want a more balanced approach.
All right. Who wants to move to delete this? I'm to 5.
5.
All right. Guys.
I would propose that we keep this. The comment is that if we are going to be talking about strategies here, I think it would be appropriate to use this as a tool to talk about what are the best practices and make sure that that is part of our strategy document.
Merritt, could this be somehow also put in like a, like one of those things, like in all cases, we encourage the city and advocates and commissions to utilize best practices as research from other communities or as implemented in other communities?
That's different from what I intended. My intent was not to say encourage the staff to look at best practices, but to identify the best practices as part of our strategy document.
Oh, okay, I see.
You mean that the best practices would be identified and then report?
Yes.
So, section of the report, it doesn't have to be a strategy within the report.
I got to step away for 2 minutes.
What I'm proposing is that we include this as a tool, and we show that over in one of the right-hand columns so that we don't lose track of it.
So maybe we could be it really a tool or really all. But
Okay.
We can decide on how many categories that show this is a part of, but I think it's particularly a part of NOAA.
Okay. As should we, because we had on the table that remove this from strategy, but we can add and make sure it's incorporated as a tool. Does that work for everyone?
That works for me.
Fist 5? 5. Joe. Bernadette?
5.
Okay. All right, so we are going to, I'm going to highlight it in dark orange, but I have tool and tool next to it. Make sure we don't forget. Okay? So, Merritt, does that work for you as far as nomenclature or whatever? Okay. We already, this one, we had one person supporting it, so by default, it is it's done. It was
Does that mean
encouraged to, yeah?
you're going to cross that out?
Okay, number 10 we have as a tool. That we had talked about this before. These are more detailed things of how we're going to, it's not a strategy, but when we're looking at preservation of diverse housing stock, this would be a tool for doing that.
Well, let's eliminate A and B. So we're just looking at 10. Identify the current inventory of NOAA properties.
Does anyone oppose that? Hearing no opposition. This is confusing. I'm going to get rid of that. Number 6.
Before you leave
yeah?
that, over in the right-hand column, it says tool for strategy 11 below.
Which we no longer have. Okay.
You could change that to strategy 1.
mm-hmm.
There we go. And it wouldn't. Thanks, Norm. 6, we have, it's duplicate of 5. 5 says support programs for assisting income eligible property owners with rehabilitating their homes to extend their useful life. This says encourage repairs and improvements to existing single family homes that avoid tear downs, extend their useful life, and ensure that they are designed and maintained in a manner that complements the dwelling's character, is compatible with adjacent homes and the character of the surrounding neighborhood. So this does say more than that. Do you want this to be part of the tool within that?
I like the way it's written and that we agreed to above, so I guess I would say I move that we strike the language and we can add more flowery stuff as we talk about, as we, in the narrative, but I don't think we need it in the actual strategy.
Okay, and we have notes on 5 above to expand it. Okay, so Bernadette put a motion to delete this. Dan's documenting our work here. How about fist to 5 to delete this? 5, 4.
I'm sorry, I thought she indicated she thought some of this should be moved up under 5. Is that correct?
Yeah, but I don't think we need to call that out right now. I think we just strike it, and then as we expand 5 in the draft, then we address it.
And Steve, we have notes to that, and we have notes to that effect already by 5.
Great. I vote to strike it.
Joe, did I get your vote? You're on mute. Okay. I can see that without worrying about hearing you. Okay. Goal 7. You finished goal 6. 2 seconds of yay. Encourage housing to support and be supported transit. So we had one strategy under here that, well, 2 that was seen to be supported. Support the development of both mixed income and 100% affordable housing throughout Edina where there is access to transit. We had 2 agnostics, Steve and Joe. Are you okay with this being included? You're kind of agnostic, so in a way, that kind of answers that. But just wanted to give you an opportunity if you wanted to say anything now. Okay.
Yeah.
This one, we had 4 supporting, 3 neutral. Promote the preservation and production of affordable housing through the areas of Edina accessible to transit by addressing financial and zoning barriers. So it's kind of like 3. So it seems a little repetitive. I don't know if we can do address financial and zoning barriers as a tool.
I move that change.
Okay, we have a movement. So that would be deleting this one, number 4, line 45, but adding the concepts as a tool. Krista 5. Okay. Tom, what would you like to say? Oh, wait, let me unmute you.
Oh,
Okay, gotcha.
if we're going to eliminate number 4, I'd like to add development and preservation to number 3.
Oh, okay. Right here.
Yeah.
Is everyone okay with that friendly amendment? I don't know if it's friendly or not. I'm assuming it is. Okay. Then we're okay with deleting this.
Yes.
I don't want to squelch conversation here. So even though I'm being really task oriented, you guys can have a conversation.
What does access to transit mean?
Meaning that you are with a few blocks of a bus stop or a train station.
Are there bus stops on Interlochen Boulevard?
Yes.
So are we supporting the development and preservation of mixed income and 100% affordable housing in not Rolling Green?
That won't happen. Land is too expensive.
We have an apartment building on Interlochen Boulevard,
Yeah, there's a
right
couple,
next to the
right?
gas station.
Yeah.
I think the idea is you wouldn't want to put, there's a lot of ways of looking at this. You wouldn't want to put a deeply affordable project where there's no access to transit. Because if it's deeply affordable, the likelihood of them being able to maintain a car is limited. And so it kind of sets people up for failure. And so the idea is to make sure that you have housing near, well, it's a double-edged sword because the Metro Transit will not put transit lines where there isn't a population core that would actually use it. So
Isn't this doesn't this just happens already? Why do we need to talk about it in this report?
Because it doesn't necessarily happen without forethought. It doesn't happen organically. And there are
Looks like it does. The transit authority won't put in lines unless there's.
But
Right, but
in the area of where there's scarce resources, right? Like the city isn't going to be able to invest in anything, that the priority would be to encourage it in areas where the existing infrastructure is there versus if somebody came in with a development in an area that didn't necessarily have access to transit, that would be less appealing than supporting something that's already, especially when you talk about preservation, where it's already there, you know, where they might say people might say, oh, we don't want any apartments on Interlaken. Well, there already are apartments on Interlaken, and they blend in just fine and nobody even notices they're there. So if the city's going to make an investment, let's invest in those pieces. And if there's a chance to redevelop or build something similar along that same corridor that's not intrusive to the existing single family neighborhood, or that you might say, you know what, that's a good location. It's transit. And you don't necessarily think about transit a ton in Edina because it's not exactly like Grand Central Station. You know, there's bus routes and stuff, but it's not robustly served by transit.
So can we add the word existing, access to existing transit?
No.
But the Metro Transit's constantly reevaluating their lines. And so sometimes there isn't, access to transit also would mean where the stops are, because if you could have a bus going down in front of your house, but you may have to walk a half a mile to get to the next stop, if it's an express bus. And so sometimes there's some back and forth negotiating, like, we're going to build an apartment here. Would you consider moving your bus stop? Does that make sense?
Stephanie, I also have this thought that this document in a way ties into the comprehensive plan. And so things like environment, transit, should be, these should tie into the bigger plan. And so,
right. So the transit,
we should address these kind of.
Yep. I'm going to propose that we're going to skip over these right now. Joe has an early time departure, and I want to make sure, since these are brand new, that we get to them somewhat before he leaves, since he's already opined somewhat on these ones, and he has not on these. So if you're okay with that, I would like to, we're going to put these on hold. They're marked there, so I know we haven't touched them. So Steve, I don't know if you want to talk about these, and then we'll go through and a little bit more methodically than we have when we went through the first round of FISTA 5, when it was like lightning round. This one we can talk about a little bit more, but we only have Joe for 10 minutes.
I'll be quick. There were originally 12 strategies that were proposed for goal 8. We thought that was excessive, and we saw an opportunity to try to simplify that. So the sub-team met. We maintained number 1, so that's the one that was there before, and that was labeled as a green before. So the ones that are new are 2 through 6, and they represent restatements or consolidation of the previous strategies that were identified. So this was just an attempt by the subcommittee to make things a little easier to read and a little bit more specific in their orientation.
So number 1 was down here, excuse me. It was a straight 5 across. Nope, there's a 3 in there. Norm gave it a 3. So that was a green. Number 2 is, I don't know why the fonts keep changing. Approve zoning amendments and pursue zoning changes to encourage split lots to allow infill single-family ownership housing, detached or attached, on lots after splitting that are 50 feet or wider. Is that a question, Tom, or a
Just
score?
gonna give you points.
Oh, I can accept.
So would this be, if you were in a neighborhood where the lots were 110 feet, then or you could split those, you could split a lot in half. But not only, in addition to that, the implication would be there'd be changes in the side yard setbacks, correct?
No. I think all the existing setback regulations would stay intact. The idea here is not to allow properties to encroach on adjacent properties, but simply to allow 2 units instead of 1 unit.
You could do a side by side duplex.
To do a side-by-side duplex, but you'd still have to have setbacks from your neighbors that were whatever was identified for that neighborhood.
Yeah, because I think setbacks are based on the overall lot width size too. So if on the block had a 150-foot wide lot and a 20-foot side yard setback, clearly on a 50-foot lot, you couldn't have a 20-foot side yard setback, because you'd have a really skinny house.
So
I think it's based as a proportion to the lot width.
what's allowed in terms of lot splits?
They each go up by 1 to Planning Commission and City Council, but they're individually an overall policy regarding them.
So I'll tell you, I have an anecdote. We owned a house that had a double lot. The house was on one lot, and we had a second lot that was a side yard, essentially served as a side yard, had a driveway in it. And we were interested in splitting off the lot to sell it so we could control the development of our neighboring house. And it was a huge pain, and it was not quote unquote encouraged. There was no, it was like, ooh, you want to do that? Ooh, It was a platted lot, but the tax parcels had been merged. So it was like it was a lot, but it wasn't a lot, and we were gonna have to do all this stuff. And we ended up selling the house. Long and short of it is we ended up deciding, you know what, this is like way too much looking around. And there could have been another house there, and it would have built perfectly into the neighborhood, and it was fine because we were the only people that had 2 lots. Everybody else had a single lot, and it would have been just fine. And we would have built something respectful to the existing structure because we were intending to live there. But it just ended up being way too much rigmarole for a non-developer to deal with. So I support the idea that the city would be a little more encouraging of people's creativity, with the idea that it would still go through a approval process, but you would give people a path to get something like that approved.
Exactly.
Because it seems though, if you in a single family neighborhood, you're not allowed to do a side by side duplex, right?
We couldn't have built a duplex there, but
But I'm saying this seems a change in what the city's doing now. The city looks at lot splits. People want to split their lots. So there's 2 single family homes. This goes even further. It says you can do a side by side you can do a side by side duplex. The lots.
Well, what I read here is it says pursue zoning changes. So in those areas where you'd want people to build side by side duplexes or higher density, that you would potentially rezone specific areas to allow for that. But in the existing R1 or whatever they have here, the single family neighborhoods, without a zoning change, you could not do that.
Now,
I think we may have confused ourselves with some editing here in the sense that you can either build two single-family homes on a new split lot, or you could do one duplex that would have as its dividing line, the midline between the two split lots. You couldn't build two sets of duplexes. And I don't think we made that very clear in the language that we used here. The idea is not to try to change the R1 zoning for this neighborhood.
So the idea would be, I think the vernacular, Mary, you can correct me, is zero lot line, right? When you allow people to build right up to the lot line is versus duplex. So it's a technically a home, but there's no lot. It goes right to the very edge, and then the neighbor goes right to the very edge, and you're both clustered in the middle, and then you theoretically have larger side yards as a result of that to buffer you from the neighbors.
Exactly.
And there's examples of that all along, like they're on Malibu Drive and Schaefer Road, and those types of developments exist currently in the city.
So we should say attached and in parentheses, zero lot line.
Or a term is to allow attached single-family units. That's another way. Both terms are used, sometimes interchangeably, but
Merritt, say that again.
We're just trying to clarify, Merritt, that you can't have two attached units in the two new lots that have been created. So we're saying you can have one attached unit that is in the center of that now split property.
mhm.
It goes back to the basic concept that Bernadette was describing, where somebody owns two lots. They've only been using one of the two for whatever reason, and now they want to split that. And this is just saying that's something that we want to encourage.
Hello, Steve.
This can be discussed when we get to tools, but you could use this to varying degrees. So the concept here is a strategy that it would be considered under certain situations, and I can help identify different tools when we get to that discussion.
Should we vote on this while we have Joe, or did we lose Joe?
Steve, this
Yeah.
is Norm. When we talked about this in our meeting, the language there was to consider zoning improvements, and that would be to review the pluses and minuses. The way using the term approve, there's a very affirmative position, as if this is a foregone conclusion. I would recommend that we change that to consider zoning amendments, et cetera.
I'm okay with that. The reason I'm okay with that is I think anytime you put a phrase in there like approve, it's going to go through a process of consideration by the city council anyway before it gets approved. So consider makes sense. Yeah, I am a 5. So are we ready to vote? Need more clarification?
Janet,
I thought I voted.
Janet's 5. Bernadette,
5, sorry.
okay. So we're on to number 3.
Yeah.
Maybe if I weren't on mute, you guys could have been hearing me this whole time.
We were watching you. I'm a 5 on number
Provide
3.
zoning ability to your, that was Joe?
Yeah.
So I've just been talking to you guys for like 20 minutes now. Steve, does anyone have any discussion, questions, concerns on this one? Okay, if no discussion needed, Tom is a 5.
Dan's a 5.
Dan's a 5. Oh,
5.
Bernadette's a 5. Now we need Janet, who I lost her video, and I'm going to take her off mute because she can speak still. And Norm. Norm's a 3.
I am a 5.
5. Okay. Another one approved. And Joe, it's 8:03. I want to lose you, but don't want you to get fired either.
Thanks, Joe.
Stay as long as you can.
I'll check with the boss, make sure it's okay.
Okay. Amend current R1 zoning to allow ADUs, auxiliary dwelling units, and self-contained mother-in-law units.
Just as a point of clarification, those are essentially the same thing. There's different terminology that refers to ADU, and some people prefer mother-in-law units. People call them granny flats. So it's just however you think of auxiliary dwelling units.
Actually, there's a difference.
Oh,
One
sorry.
can be like a carriage house, an apartment above a garage, or something that's detached from the main house. And another could be an added-on unit to the house that could technically 2 units, but attached to the home.
Yeah, I thought those were just different types of auxiliary dwelling units.
Yeah, right.
I like the term accessory dwelling unit, which people
Oh, right.
use sometimes instead of auxiliary, just because I think it's more plain language. You can do codes so that they can be or attached to attached to the house or garage. So I think it would be whether you guys, I think that would get at the tools, what types of tools you want to recommend. And that this could be more general, but they are very different. You might be able to say or maybe again, you say consider amending or evaluate or explore options to amend R1 zoning to allow accessory dwelling units such as mother-in-law apartments. So, sound different.
So my question about this, when you start talking about the mother-in-law, to me, it makes it sound like you're not going to rent it. It's being used by somebody within the home that is, a member of that household per se versus like, or a nanny or whatever. But like, the idea is that you would be able to have someone who's not a member of your home live there and you would receive a rental license, right? I mean, if you so chose.
Yes.
Yes.
And depends on how the zoning is written.
When you start talking about who's going to live there, that it starts sounding like, if you're my teenage son unit or whatever, or my young adult child unit, it's different to me than, a more kind of accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah.
Implies that you have a little bit more right to use it for a variety of things. You could do that, but you could do other things too.
Yes.
Right.
And the intent here is to acknowledge that there.
Merritt, may go.
I agree using just that one such as implies a certain type of accessory dwelling unit. So maybe just removing that such as part. In addition to zoning code being able to address whether it's attached or detached, it can also address whether the unit can be
Whoa, someone's background noise. Bernadette, it might be you. Okay.
or if the zoning code can also identify whether or not the people living there have a member of the primary residence household. And again, I can write up a couple of cool examples.
Is this number 4 meant to include building an ADU specifically for rental?
No.
Well, yes, in the sense that if you were hiring a nanny or an au pair and you were providing them with a space to live in, and you either provided the rental as part of their compensation or you charged them rental and collected the money from the compensation you're providing. So it is intended to say that this can be used for non-family members.
I would not support having an ADU for rental purposes. And if we put this, if we approve this or recommend this, I would want to make sure that there is some specific language included that we do not intend this for open rental.
Yeah, I originally had this written as non-rental, and Tom suggested that would not fly. It wouldn't work. It would prevent resale of the property.
So I would support this for non-rental, but inclusive of things like an au pair or a nanny, or obviously an extended family member. But if it was for rental, then I would not support this. General rental.
Okay, Tom, are you still on the conversation?
Yeah, I kind of see it as a couple of things. First of all, in some families, if you're an adult, you're expected to pay rent even if you're living with family, extended family. So that complicates the thing. Then there is the resale. In my area, there are a number of two-story detached garages, and I don't know what is on the second floor, whether it's a studio or an office or a studio apartment. I don't have a I would support an open rental. I also can think of situations where perhaps you have a family that in order to keep their home, they have to rent out part of it. You see these walkout basements that could easily become an apartment. There's an awful lot of discussion about how we have to consider denser housing. We, in order to make more housing affordable, also the environmental impact. And many of the houses we live in today were designed for much larger home or families. And I don't have a problem with a general rental of the apartments. So I would rather stay neutral on the language around whether it's rental or not. Maybe initially the family that converts it, yeah, they might have extended family, adult child, a disabled person, an in-law, or somebody they want to house on the property, or some sort of domestic staff, nanny, caretaker, health provider. So I would just assume, my preference is to leave the rental or non-rental language out and leave it neutral. If some households need that extra income.
Janet?
I just have a question as the only renter on the housing task force. What is why wouldn't you want me in that rental property in there? That's my question for those who are opposed.
Can you say that again, Janet? Why are you opposed to rental?
Yeah, why are people opposed to the renters? I'm the only renter on this housing task force. So
right.
I'm trying to figure out why.
Yeah, I guess that would be a question. What is the concern with having it be available for rental?
Yeah.
Everybody's on mute, so you may want to unmute people.
So I guess Joe and Norm, you're the ones that are more vocal about it being only supporting it if it weren't available for rental. So what is the concern about it being available for rental?
Well, the R1 has been very specific so far, and it's not clear to me that there is a large demand for changing this to look more like Minneapolis, where you can have as many units as you want on a piece of property. And I'm not sure that this would really receive the support of people in the city of Edina. And in fact, this, when we talk about community engagement, I think this would be one of those areas that would be suitable for getting input from the community.
But I guess I'm saying, if you have a house and a carriage house, so there's already the ADU. What difference does it make if it's a family member or it's rental? It's still two structures on a lot.
Do we want to make this open to every piece of property in Edina?
Well, I mean, the fact remains that very few of these get built. They're expensive to build. But I'm just trying to figure out the philosophy of why not rental. If the building's there, why restrict it?
Do we have examples of buildings that are being rented today?
There's a house 2 doors from me that's a rental house. And it's been a rental house for past 3 or 4 years. Across the street, before it got torn down, there was a duplex it was actually a triplex, and usually they rented the one unit out to a college student. And I would also add that in this situation, you're going to have an owner living on the property. And so they're going to be particular about who they rent to. And further, they're going to attract people that are comfortable with having the property owner right next door or on top of them or underneath them or in close proximity. Having owned and lived in a duplex, having the owner on site, you get a different kind of tenant. You get a much more responsible tenant, and you have much more control over the situation. So and again, there's an environmental issue, there's an economic issue, and I think this is something that we should be open to as our world changes. And I wouldn't be surprised if down the road, either through the legislature or the courts, this whole issue of R1 gets thrown out.
And Norm, I want to say that R1 does allow for, there are a lot of rental properties in Edina that are in R1.
Yeah. As a result of the 2008 housing crisis, a number of homes were purchased by hedge funds and are rented back to people living in them. And that occurred in Edina as well as more extensively in other communities.
And these are accessory dwelling units that were rented out?
These
No,
are single-family homes.
R1.
Straight up single-family homes. So your neighbor could be renting and you would never know. And they're renting from a hedge fund.
Right, a large corporation.
Yes.
And I apologize, guys. I do need to run.
Joe, thank you. You hung in there.
So
I am just going to stick with the fact that I just need a logical explanation to why a renter cannot be in that unit. I'm looking for a logical explanation to why some of us are opposed to that. I am not opposed to it. I am a renter. I would like to have an ADU as an option. The people who seem to oppose it, they definitely have options to be homeowners only. So that does discriminate against me as a renter. That's all I'm saying. And if R1 already allows renters, why not?
Merritt, unmute. I'll unmute you. There you go.
Yeah, I wanted to point out I've been a renter for about 20 years of my life. As a kid with my parents for many years, as an early married person. Then I will be again probably when I'm a senior. So there's prejudice that renters are not stable, or won't be around for very long or whatever. But I think in the context of the type of units we're talking about here, you're not going to have activity that people might associate with problem rental properties where you have bad management. I do know that my parents had an old accessory dwelling down in their last condo building. Mom now rents in senior. And they really wanted to fix it up so they could have a caregiver there so that they could stay in that single family home. They ended up not through the process because they would have had to go through the city process to reestablish it as a non-conforming accessory dwelling unit. But I just kind of back up, Janet. I'm not really sure that the concern about it being rental or ownership is as big a deal as people might think it is.
So right now the language is agnostic regarding it. It's not supporting it. It's not denying it. It's silent on it. And then that could be left up to city council or whoever else to make that final determination regarding that piece. This is purely allowing for these type of units to be developed in residential neighborhoods. Silent on everything else. Does anyone want to take a vote on that?
So vote on as it stands.
Yeah, vote as it stands without extra language. It changed. I added consider,
Right.
and I added attached or detached, such as, not and, but such as. So this is one example thereof. So it could be other examples.
And it's clear to everyone that there is an owner living in the main home that's on this property. If that's not clear, then we should add something that clarifies that. But if everyone feels that's already understood, then let's leave it alone.
I don't know. I think it's silent on that too. And I think that's a personal property right. So let's say I, as a property owner, put a accessory dwelling unit because I have college age kids who are going to graduate. And I'm like, I don't want them under my same roof. So I build one in my backyard. And then I sell my house, and whoever buys my house is buying it as investment property. And so they're going to rent both of them. I mean, I don't know if we can limit who owns my home in the future and what they do with my home in the future.
Okay.
You can legally limit it. The codes I see out here in Washington County all require owner occupied in order to have an accessory unit.
Really?
It's legal.
What about they sell it? They have to tear down their ADU?
No. The renter leaves along with them, and then it gets a new owner. And then the idea is that you can't have a rental property where both, if you're going to have the ADU occupied, then the residence has to be occupied by an owner. It can't be a hedge fund owning both properties.
Yeah, I think that's the more typical use of an accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to add language to that, or do you still want to keep it as
Sounds
is?
like we should, based on what we just discussed. So we should say with one unit being owner occupied.
Okay. Let's take a vote then. All right, we have a 5 from Tom, a 5 from Steve, a 4 from Dan, a 1 from Norm, a 5 from Janet, a silent on Joe, and Bernadette. I now have you on the screen, but you have your camera off. So 5 from Bernadette. Okay, so it passes. Five, support teardowns, rebuilds, but add regulations that prevent privacy invasion via window placement and infringement of both active and passive solar energy capture. Can I add something on this one? Just as an anecdotal thing, I was reading our local paper today, and they're talking about this issue in one of the articles, and they're saying that they're really against tear downs and rebuilds where it's a wall outside of someone's window. So it's the opposite. People are really upset that there's not a window opposite their window, that it's a blank wall. So when they look out the window, they see a wall rather than a window. So I'm just saying that, you know, we're dealing with the opposite issue of what you're trying to address here.
And just to be clear, and I had to clarify this for myself, passive solar collection refers to the concept of building a home that is designed to be heated, where a wall is designed to be heated by the sun and radiate the heat that's captured by that wall into the home. So it's not having a solar panel on the top of the house, but it's a home that's been designed to maximize the use of solar energy that's striking the house.
Right. No,
But this is not, I want to make sure people didn't misinterpret this as passive solar energy refers to either a greenhouse or a garden or just a bunch of flowers growing alongside one side of the house that's now going to have too much shade for that type of flower. This is very specific language.
Yep.
I wanted to say something about the window business. And maybe it's very personal, but when you have somebody designs a new house and you have 3 big windows looking in your bedroom so that their young daughters can look at you, and you're going to be the pervert if they see something. And they could have put little windows in there or placed the windows differently. I think that's a difference between seeing a wall. I'm not interested in seeing a wall, but I don't want to know if you have a full container of milk in your refrigerator when I'm sitting at my dining room table. And I think with some planning, you can have the ventilation and some natural light, but you don't have to be seeing everything that your neighbor is doing or that sort of thing. I mean, you can put the windows this way or that way or make them smaller or something. So that's what I'm thinking of. And, you know, passive solar, whether the house was designed that way, even old houses, you know, a lot of the predominant windows were on the south side. So, especially in the narrow lots where the city changed the setback requirements, and you have somebody who's not really good at design, they're just running solely on cost. I just, you know, maybe I'm a little passionate about this topic, but that's what I'm trying to get at. People in areas with larger lots, this is not a big issue. But
Right.
somebody who wants to put an Eden Prairie house on a city lot, it just ain't gonna work.
Merritt?
Are you concerned about being accused of being a peeping Tom?
Well,
No, I have a serious.
I'm not peeping. I'm worried about their peeping daughters.
Should we take a vote on this? Is there any other comment? Yeah, Merritt.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just had a question. I thought Edina had years ago put in something to regulate the design for houses that were put on tear down lots to address like size and some of these things. Is that correct?
There is. There's height. There's height. I mean, Edina has a terrain kind of like this. And so you may have a house here and a house here that are next door neighbors. And there is some requirements regarding the first floor height and the overall height.
But nothing around windows and things like that?
No.
No.
You can come visit my house and I'll show you.
Okay, because like St. Paul has design guidelines for exactly this kind of thing in a number of other communities. So, you know, I think it's very reasonable if you're gonna put in design guidelines, address these kind of things. That was it.
Do you want to vote on this or is more discussion?
Yeah, it's not clear to me how you would regulate this. Would you say if you've got a window in one location that the regulation would be that the person building a new home cannot have a window directly adjacent to it or within so many feet of your window? It would seem like this is it would be difficult to implement, first of all, and it would be it's kind of a intruding on the rights of someone to use their property.
it is possible to do that. Really, any level of detail you want in design, so you could require like windows be installed at an offset from existing windows on neighboring properties. I don't think it's an intrusion on property rights when the zoning regulations are in place and people know what they are before they choose to do this kind of a project. So it's really about, as a policy, how prescriptive does the city choose to be on design standards if it's going to do this. So for instance, when St. Paul they formed a committee of builders and neighbors and architects just to talk through what design standards would be appropriate. It was kind of a process unto itself.
So are there regulations in St. Paul on window placement?
There is something about window placement, yes. And I can't remember if it's, they don't allow the big blank wall, like was being mentioned before. I can't remember what they do for any offsets, but I can get a link to the code and share it with everybody.
I think that would be good. I would recommend that we, instead of saying add design guidelines and regulations, I would recommend changing that to say consider.
Does someone want to call for a vote? All right, Steve. So we changed consider designs and regulations. We added that.
Yep.
Okay,
Sounds good.
just a 5. All right, Steve has a 5. Steve, 5. Sorry, takes me a while. 5, 4 for Dan. Tom, did I get you? 4. So looks like it passes. All right, last one in this section, and then we're going to go up and finish 7. Develop small area plans for zoning along Vernon Avenue from 169 to Interlochen, France and Valley View from 66 to Highway 100. Evaluate additional areas for R2 zoning. So it's increasing density along transit corridors is what I'm reading this to be.
Yeah, we tried to be very specific so people would know exactly what we were talking about. And it relates back to the 2008 comp plan areas for potential change.
I'm going to put a comma after France, so it's not like a France Valley View. I don't even think they do cross, but I want to make sure that they're 2 separate streets.
It's France Avenue north of 62 is what that, I think I left that out by mistake.
Okay.
It could also be south of 62, but I don't think there's any property available.
Any questions, discussion, or should we go for a vote?
We sent a bunch of pictures out of all of the homes that currently exist on Vernon, for Malibu Drive, and also some over on 49th that are all single family attached homes. They look pretty nice.
And is R2 just duplexes?
R2 is just single family attached, I believe how it's defined.
All right, so you wouldn't allow fourplexes. You wouldn't allow increased density to fourplexes along there, because there have been discussions in the past of like France Avenue, 55, 55th to 62, having fourplexes.
I don't think the current zoning law is set up to allow that level of density, but I can double check that.
Merritt, do you know, is R2 just duplexes? Or
R2,
what a lot? You don't know?
R2, the definition varies by community. Each community can define
Right,
R2 its own way.
Gotcha. Would you allow up to fourplexes, or are you
No.
limiting this to duplexes?
Personally, I was doing duplexes only. Only because I want to do this in small stages.
Okay, I just want clarity. Now there's just been internal discussions about up to 4, but
I think our interpretation was there were 2-unit properties. Or I love the single family attached. And some of the properties on 49th Street are actually platted separately. Each unit is platted separately because each unit is owned separately.
okay. Do you want to do fist to 5 on this? You ready for that, or do you need more discussion? Seems like you're getting weary. Okay, Dan is a 4. He's already started. Tom is a 5. 4 for Norm. 5 for Bernadette. 5 for Steve. Jane can't see you, so can you speak up?
5.
5. 5 for Janet. All right, this passes. All right, let's go back to goal 7 so we can wrap that up. Now, the remaining ones under...
I'm going to skip out. I'm leaving. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, you have to step out?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'll share this with you. If you and Joe have any comments after this, pipe in.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Janet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's try to get through at least 7. I was hoping to get through them all, but this is tough stuff. The remaining 3 in goal 7 were not highly supported. The first one is housing should support and be supported by surrounding land use, traffic capacity patterns, public facilities, and connections to open space and natural resource features. This is housing supported and be supported by transit. We had 4 agnostic and only 2 supporting. Merritt.
These seem to me like they're more general, kind of land use items that the city figures out when it's doing planning and everything. I'm not sure that they need to be addressed in the housing report. Others may disagree.
Steve.
Yeah, my comment early on goal 7 was that number 3 was the clearest, most straightforward strategic statement. And I would agree with what
Right.
Merritt just said, that these are more general, less clear strategies. So I opted just for number 3.
And I guess I was strong. I mean, I think I'm probably the most strongly opposed. To me, I felt, echoing what others have said, it just felt like a little bit like a kitchen sink, like we're going to build housing, it should do this, and we should do this, and we should do this. And I felt like it just got a little bit too, if you try to accomplish everything, you end up accomplishing nothing. So they didn't feel very strategic to me. We're just piling on a bunch of additional rhetoric. So that's not that I don't think they're important. I think there's other documents and other places where the city, as we mentioned before today, that it's if we're looking at this as a companion or an expansion of the comp plan, let's address some of that other stuff about public facilities and open space and all that stuff. Let's address that in the comp plan and use this as a really strategic document around housing. So that's why I was more harsh, I guess, for number 1 and what's now numbered 1 and number 5. And then number 2 is redundant. We talked about, I think we already beat the transit horse to death at this point. So at this point I supported it, but I would move that we strike what's number 2 here, as it's now been incorporated into number 3 that's already been approved.
Okay. Do you want to move to strike line 46 and line 47?
Yeah, I want to strike 46, 47, and 48.
Okay. Right. Does anyone oppose striking those three?
So these would show up someplace else, either as a tool or you feel like you've already addressed it.
Yeah, I would support striking 46 and 48. 47 has an interesting idea about walkable neighborhoods, and I'm wondering if we can incorporate that into our current strategy 3. No, we can't, so it might have to be a standalone idea.
All right, then why don't we go one by one? To 5 on striking line 46. Okay, and move to strike it, so I'm assuming you strike it. So, oh, actually, it wouldn't be specified, it would be striking. I think it's just hand on what was striking. Dan is not here right now.
Dan's going to want to strike it.
Dan's going to want to strike it. Bernadette speaks for Dan. Does anyone speak for Joe or Janet? Okay. Why don't we have this stricken right now? Unless I hear differently. And I will keep these in another part of the document in case, as we're writing this, realize we need to fill this in. All right, then I'm going to skip down to 48. So that was another one that was discussed about striking. Is anyone opposed to striking this? Hearing none, are you all okay with striking this? Norm, how do you feel? You're okay with striking it? Bernadette, you suggested striking it. Okay. I feel a little odd because we're missing 3 people, but again, we will reflect this in the minutes. And if there's counter, if they want to revisit this, we have to be open to that, I guess. Number 2, Steve, you wanted to make sure that this is an interesting concept and that it should be preserved.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, you before.
I'm not quite sure why that's 0, other than that I thought 3 was a better expression. So, I think I may have overreacted. It's probably late in the day.
All right, well then it seems like it would pass because everyone else except Dan, who has stepped away, was not supportive of it.
Yeah, you can change my 0 to a 5 now.
Bernadette, do you want to say something more about this? Because you want to strike it. Steve wants to keep it.
I guess I feel like there's got to be a way that we acknowledge transit and, pedestrian access or something like that, like access to transit and pedestrian connections or something that we could incorporate it into number 3, because I feel like, again, when you start like getting into the walkable neighborhoods and all that stuff, more like a urban design principle than it does a housing strategy. And so, again, not that it's not important, I just don't know if this is the document, if we're trying to keep it succinct and focused really strategically on housing. I think there's a way to incorporate it into to merge 2 and 3 together. Because to me, foot transit by foot should be part of that chain of people moving. You're going to have to walk somewhere or get somewhere to get to your transit, to get to your final destination. So being sensitive to those pedestrian connections to me is part of the transit idea. And so I guess that's why I was voting to strike it as a standalone and put it into item 3.
Yeah, I would prefer to leave item 3 alone, and I agree with what Bernadette is saying. It is general design guidelines or guidance, and I think it's built into a lot of the language that's already into the comp plan. So I'm not sure we're gaining much by repeating it here. The other reason, frankly, that I was interested in it is I thought it's one of those topics that is over the next decade going to become more and more relevant. And it felt like we ought to at least acknowledge it somewhere in our commentary, but I'd be willing to just put it somewhere else, in the preamble or somewhere else in our document. I don't think it's strong enough to be a strategy here.
Merritt?
Wondering if this would be a concept. Spend a little time community driver section towards the beginning of the report. So community drivers is really about the relationship between housing and other parts of the city and institutions of the city.
I like that idea a lot in that I think it adds a positive spin to community drivers, whereas right now a lot of community driver language is going to be resisting something. So that's great.
Are you all okay with that, Tom? You've been silent. Are you okay with having that be part of the preamble and community drivers and striking it as a strategy?
Well, either that or use it as a tool. I just think, to me, even sidewalks have even become more important because of the virus, because that's how people exercise. And I think it would also help with other issues. I mean, if more kids would walk to school, you know, their parents don't have to drive them, or I just would like to see a stronger, larger sidewalk network throughout the city. So wherever you can put it and kind of put it as assertive language as possible, I would appreciate it. I mean, there's little gaps here and there, and there's big gaps. And so I'm not against whether it should be a strategy or a tool, or you guys can figure out where to put it. I would just like to make sure that the concept is in place.
Okay. We are going to delete as a strategy. I'm going to highlight it in a different color, but make sure it's concepts like we did up here. It's reflected in the document, but it doesn't have to be its own strategy. Okay, just to say, because I know time is up and people are tired, we really have, I think, discussed goal 10 and 11 pretty well. These were introduced later. So I don't know if we need to go over those again. 9 is short.
9 has been replaced.
Oh, 9 was been replaced by 10 and 11. So yep. You guys replaced, so we can, that was so easy.
Yeah.
These were replaced by 10 and 11.
Yep.
Steve, you just saved about 15 minutes.
Terrific.
All right, let me write that down though. All right, then we only have one more to go through. 12. So let's power through, then we can be done with strategies. You guys are too tired for the cheering. Goal 12, which was added, encourage sustainable design and technology in all housing developments. So So this is a new goal that was added, so we have not discussed this as a goal. And underneath, since this is I'm going to tap, there was use environmentally sustainable site design and building practices for new housing and encourage, and new housing and rehabilitated housing, including encourage alternative energy sources, building design that encourages active and passive energy, water conservation, mitigation of water runoff, and use of alternative transportation options. So it deals with the environment and sustainability, and I think this is the only goal that does so. So we just were talking about transit. This is a related but different topic. So that, first of all, let's make sure that the remaining people here are okay with adding this as a goal. So let's do a fist to 5 for adding this as a goal. Tom is a 5. Norm is a 3 or 4. Dan is a 4. Steve is a, what happened? Oh, Steve is a 4. We don't have Joe. We don't have Janet. Bernadette. 4. All right. Well, that would indicate that we should include it. Not terribly strong support, but support. Encourage the use. All right. So these are all subsets of the same thing. They're marked differently, but I think they're all pretty much it's really one strategy that includes all of these. They're on different lines, but I don't think we're voting for them differently. I formatted it differently. Norm.
I would recommend that on item A, we add the term financially viable, so that reads the encouragement of financially viable alternative energy sources.
Okay. Bernadette, Merritt, sorry.
Yeah, I just want to point out that there's lots of things that the city does, like putting in streets that aren't financially viable. So I'm just curious what is meant by, if financially viable is really adding anything. I mean, either the market decides if it's viable or the city decides if it wants to subsidize it. I mean, a lot of the housing isn't financially viable.
I agree with Merritt, but why are streets not financially viable? That's like saying a roof is not financially viable.
Well, the government has to subsidize streets through taxes.
The other thing I would think about too is when we developing wind and solar energy or whatever else somebody might come up with, sometimes these are not financially viable to begin with, but as they become more accepted and the technology improves and they do become financially viable. So, I mean, and also what we think of like oil and gas, those aren't always financially viable when you look at all the tax subsidies, either directly or indirectly, that have gone into those things over the years. I just wouldn't want to discourage somebody who tries to be innovative and tries something new.
Well, under that scenario, we'd try anything, right? Anything could be financially viable.
I suppose. I'm just saying that, you know, that what might not be financially feasible today in the future could be. Like, I pay a little extra on my electric bill to have wind energy. So, you know, if I didn't do that, is wind financially viable? But I feel like that improves the environment, and we're less dependent on other countries for our energy. So it's just a personal value thing. But some people may or may not argue that that's financially viable. So I kind of would stay neutral on the financially viable, just because of evolution of technology.
Steve?
Yeah, I think the intent here is to simply provide encouragement, that we're not asking the city to get actively involved in building anything. It's just saying, use environmentally sustaining site design and building practices. And I thought Norm's notion here of financially viable was simply to say, we want to make sure we don't force builders to do things that don't make any financial sense to them. Like, we're concerned that we're requiring underground parking, and that's inhibiting some of the ability to build some of the housing we'd like to see built. So I think Norm was trying to ensure that we don't do that again by saying everybody has to use geothermal, even though for many builders that would be prohibitively expensive and they wouldn't build as a result. So this feels like it's sort of a general wish list, and Norm is just trying to ensure that we're not making it too onerous.
Well stated.
Well, I would also argue on that financial feasibility. If I'm a builder and I'm a spec builder, it's financially feasible or most viable for me to put in the cheapest HVAC system I can find and get away with. But as a homeowner who might be there for 20 or 30 years, I might want a much more expensive HVAC system because in the long run, it would be cheaper for me. Because of maybe energy efficiency and lower maintenance. So, that's another thing to think about. And those who are developing rental housing, are they in it for the long haul, or are they just going to turn it around and sell it to some investment firm? Or so, that's another thing to think about. What do you mean by financial viability?
Well, apparently you have an idea on it because you're fighting against the inclusion of the words.
Well, I'm thinking that would apply also to all of them. So it doesn't necessarily need to be in energy sources. So how about to the extent that it's understanding financial realities, or taking into account financial realities, encourage the use of environmentally sustainable site design and building practices of new and rehab. So include it there, keep it out of the individual one. Because I mean, it's true.
Long term, as long as it's long term, not just for the.
All right, taking into account financial payback. There's payback too.
Merritt's got a question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, when the markets on energy shift, which it sounds like is going to be happening over the next decade, if natural gas is no longer financially viable compared to other sources, would this kind of thing imply that we shouldn't use natural anymore? I am wrestling with putting it here when it seems like a general notion for everything in the report. And so to me here, it seems assumption is that sustainable energy isn't financially viable, and the markets are shifting. And so that's not completely true today and won't be true in the future. So I'm just not sure what value it adds, since it's considered through a financial lens.
I guess one thing I was thinking of, like, there are now solar gardens that you can become a part of. You could designate that all the electrical use comes from, either a solar garden or wind generated, you have that choice as at least as a homeowner. And I thought, well, if you do it, or, you know, what if you had small wind turbines in your backyard or solar panels on your house? They may not look pretty by somebody's standard. I mean, I can't even have a solar clothes dryer, sometimes called a clothesline. I mean, you know, unless it's grandfathered in.
Wait, I just have a question. Does Edina not allow that? Because I have a clothesline, but I know some communities don't allow clotheslines.
They're technically not allowed in Edina.
Really?
Grandfathered in.
All right. Because that's the only way I dry my clothes in the summertime is on the clothesline.
Most people hang them on their clothesline and just ignore the regulation, and I haven't heard of anybody going to jail over it.
Okay. All right. So where do we go from here? Norm, do you have a retort?
Well, specifically, when I was thinking about alternative energy, there are instances where alternative energy has been encouraged when it's not necessarily financially viable today, not precluding that it might be financially viable sometime in the future when future investments are made. Just to want to have the city in a position, I want to make sure the city is in a position when there's recommendations given that they are financially viable.
Right.
Doesn't seem like an untoward position to be in.
Right. Right. We don't want to add regulations that are make it so they're cost prohibitive and it stalls construction.
Well, regulations cost.
And Steve's example of underground parking is certainly one of those.
Right. So, Merritt, what do you recommend how we address that? Do we provide context as a tool to make it so this doesn't become a mandate that kills projects?
Well, the term encourage in the goal statement makes clear that it's not a mandate. And I know you shift other language in other ones to have the same effect. And really, it's only the city going to mandate this whole report as a recommendation. So to say use environmental design, you know, maybe instead of use,
Say consider or encourage.
right. Or incorporate as reasonable. Incorporate as opportunities emerge or something like that. But applying it, but having it in the number one instead of the subpoint.
What about the idea of incentivizing people to use these things as opposed, you know, encouraging, but providing like additional, I don't know, some additional parking or reduce this or reduce that or encourage, you know, I mean, you could come up with some sort of quid pro quo, but it could be, I like the idea of with some incentive, some of these things might become viable.
Could that be a tool? Create incentives? You know, we could create loan programs for forgivable loan programs, grants.
Yeah, I think incentive is good. I mean, we did that for ethanol. We do it for development of more oil and gas. We do it for all kinds of energy things. So yeah, I mean, incentive is good.
So are people feeling strongly enough about that to change the word encourage in the goal to incentivize?
Or is the incentive a tool?
Well, that's going even in any stronger position to provide. Are you talking about providing financial incentives?
Yeah.
I think that should be a tool instead of a strategy. One way that you encourage it is by creating these incentives. And then, you know, who knows, maybe I'll find a grant program by the EPA and I'll apply for it, and then I'll create a grant program locally.
I mean, whether education programs do that now, rehab programs do that now, where there's energy conservation, new windows.
It's after 9. Should we do a fist to 5 on this quickly? And the whole thing? We already did a fist to 5, but I want to make sure that after all the conversation that we're still there, and I've added tool of create incentives.
As a compromise, I would recommend, if I sense that there's some trouble with the term financially viable, I would change that to say consider alternative energy sources.
I would put consider as a before all of them. Consider incorporating reasonable.
Then remove encouragement of the word encouragement on item A.
Oh. Oh, okay, I see. So then,
You may
Yeah,
want to
'cause then-
do. Yep.
there, because then it applies to all of them. And these are just different ones within the whole.
Yep.
How's that, Norm?
That's fine.
Because that'd be bullet. You know, like it's a menu. Okay.
What is bullet? Can somebody clarify what bullet B means? Active and passive energy efficiency. Are we missing the word solar?
Yeah, I think there's one like placement of windows and roof lines and on larger lots, orientation of the building. So it doesn't have all the big, huge windows on the west side that heats up the building in the summertime.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. You're still okay with your scores up here? So this is a new one, and then we're done with strategies, and our next meeting, we can pop the champagne or orange juice and get on to, talking about tools. And well, actually, next meeting, we need to talk about community engagement. That's going to be the big topic.
Okay.
All right, Mary.
Meeting, since Moxie team, we've been working on putting together a draft for the report. So it would be very draft, but it was our hope that we could send that out to you the weekend before the next meeting, so you had a chance to look at it and maybe spend a little bit of time in the meeting, just kind of through if it makes sense. Is it hitting the right points, or there are sections we're missing? So is that all right, Stephanie, to do too?
Yep.
Eric, can I make 2 requests? One, that I get a printed copy, because I like to do my old-fashioned highlight, comment, and scribble notes. And the other,
require the postal service?
huh?
Postal service?
Hey, listen, even the Republicans still believe that I can make a donation using the postal service. I got a letter from them yesterday.
Hey,
So
you want a mailed copy?
a mailed copy, or I can pick it up at City Hall.
There's nobody at City Hall.
Oh, okay, well, or someplace. The other thing is, if you've got some good language about tear downs that other communities have used or that are kind of model documents, I would like to see that. If you have some, those are my 2 requests.
When is our next meeting scheduled?
September 2nd, I believe.
Given that we have a long way to go, is there a reason we are not meeting next week?
Yes, I'm out of town.
I mean, as far as the consultants, we need 2 weeks to piece. Is there something you felt should be discussed between the 2 times? Because maybe it could be done by email.
Well, we've talked a lot about tools, and there's a lot of work to fill in the blanks yet.
Well, we have the Yana from our team is going to be putting together her first draft of should so I could probably send you guys something by early next week. You could start looking at tools, and we could do kind of an on form where people can add comments, questions, etc. How would that be?
I'm sorry, but I need to hop off. This is Bernadette.
Okay, thanks, Bernadette.
Thanks, Bernadette.
Thank you, Bernadette.
Bye.
I think that at a minimum, I think that would be helpful to keep the process moving.
Okay.
How does everybody else feel about that?
Sounds great. Let's do that.
Whatever you guys want to do, I'll go along.
Okay. All right, I will complete cleaning this up. I will create a new tab in this that just shows the goals. And then you can refer back to the other ones to find out what's been deleted. I will also create an area of a holding space for tools that we took out of strategies and are putting in tools. I think some of that has already been done, but I'll try to get that all combined in the interim until we hear back from Yana and company. Thank you all. This was hard, and it took 2 months, and you did it.
Everybody.
Very useful.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.